Hey everyone, it's Mr. Wildboy94. I have another H.P. Lovecraft story. I keep trying to say book review. I have another short story review. This is the second one in this collection called H.P. Lovecraft, The Complete Fiction. Of course, I've been starting up some reviews as of this morning, where I'm going to do reviews for different short stories of H.P. Lovecraft. Originally, I thought, just in case I didn't say it in that review, of reviewing the entire book once I finished it. It's about 1,100 pages long. But then I thought, a lot of people who are going to be looking for H.P. Lovecraft, if they're looking for reviews for whatever reason in 2022, most people don't look for book reviews in 2022 on YouTube. It's usually a Goodreads thing. But if you happen to be, at least I'll have the reviews out there for people to check out, or if people happen to be a massive Lovecraft fan and they find my channel, at least you guys can find individual reviews on individual stories. Anyway, this particular story is called The Alchemist. I have read this maybe 2 or 3 times in my life over the years, including all the way back to the original Mr. Wildboy94 channel that I constantly reference. And I love this book, the cover I mean, and the silver-lined pages. Again, it reminds me of a Bible. The Alchemist is about 7 pages, almost 7.5. It's not a very long one, as was the previous one, the first one I reviewed, The Beast in the Cave. And The Alchemist, to me, doesn't click with me as well as something like The Beast in the Cave. And it's not because of 3 pages more or anything like that. It seems like this one's kind of when Lovecraft proves my point about being a little too technical in the vocabulary and whatever. That's just my personal opinion, but I generally like the story, and I like the idea, the concept here, and that's a lot of the problem with Lovecraft for me. I typically love the concept, not so much the execution a lot of the time. With this one, it's above average, for execution at least. It's not extremely long, it's not super indulgent like some certain stories I've read in the past that I was not impressed with at all. But for me, this one is a decent, above average, as I said, read for a short story that happens to be, again, about 8 pages long. So the story of this one, again, I try to keep these general ideas and these story discussions a little bit short, a little bit vague, because I don't want you to go into an 8-page long story that you could read in 20 minutes and get all the big spoiler stuff. I don't like that. Every review I looked at on YouTube today, except for like maybe 2, about this particular story, we're basically summarizing the entire events. I don't need that. Nobody needs that. Just let them pick up the book. So, with that being said, again, I'm not a massive fan of Lovecraft's writing style. This is a great example of that one. Even though this one has a very nice dark undercurrent of a tone and atmosphere to it, it's not perfect for me. Basically, there's a fellow who has kind of a curse on his family, and it seems like every single man in his family dies at the age of 32, and they kind of trace back some of the history that at least the main protagonist guy does, at least talking about some of the different people in his family who had died just in the middle of the woods, or they caught an arrow out of the middle of nowhere. It's kind of bizarre. It's kind of a fun, almost an essence of a Sherlock Holmes feel to the story, and I think this may have come right after Sherlock Holmes. I don't know. I don't know when Doyle wrote those. Anyway, that's kind of the general gist of this story is about, for some reason, there's a curse on this family line. Nobody really knows why. And he describes some sorcerer and his son. I think his name was Michael, I believe. That's odd, because my name is Michael. He describes a little bit of history with a battle and whatever that happened, and a couple of sorcerers, a father and son, like I said, that apparently put this curse on his family. And how bizarre it is that it could be coming true all these, I guess it's about 100 years later on, something like that. It's a little weird. And again, this applies to weird fiction. What do you expect? Now, I have to tell you, the characters for H.P. Lovecraft, this is something I kind of forgot to touch on The Beast in the Cave, but I think I'll kind of do it here. Again, a lot of his stories are pretty much written in first person. They're very, very boisterous in the vocabulary, a little bit too much of a weird edgelord purple prose, which to me doesn't fit as well as something like a Charles Dickens type of purple prose. That's just my opinion. It's my taste. Taste is very subjective when it comes to literature and fiction and all that. So just take that with a grain of salt. That's just a stylized thing. I don't know if I like it or not still. A lot of people seem to, especially the big Lovecraft folks out there who are probably going to shoot me down in the comments section over that. I'm sorry, it's just me. But the story itself I like. I think it's fine. The characters themselves, it's really just our main protagonist typically in every single Lovecraft story out there, and they all read the exact same way, they all talk the exact same way. I think Herbert West the Reanimator is the only story I've ever read from H.P. Lovecraft that has a different type of tone, and has a different type of perspective coming from Herbert himself as the protagonist there, from what I remember. But other than that, you don't really get a whole lot of variance from Lovecraft. And Lovecraft knew what he was good at and what he wasn't at. And that's good. I like and I admire, especially when a writer knows their strong suit. That's one thing I try to admire in my own writing when I haven't published much aside from some poetry, but I try to recognize what my weaknesses are and try to avoid a lot of that stuff because I'm not good enough to be able to correct those things. So avoidance is always fine. Imagine somebody who stutters, for example. If they stutter on the letter B, like ball or Bob or Bobby or anything like that. Bobby is probably a hard word for someone who stutters on the letter B to pronounce. Oh my god. Anyway, I learned something new for myself today. A stutterer will try to avoid those words. That's one thing I learned from Travis McBee when he talked about some writing tips on one of his videos. Years ago, I watched him recently too. That's one of the things he mentioned just the other day when I was watching this stuff, even though he's basically retired from YouTube. But still, I feel like that's kind of what you see with Lovecraft and what I take up as my own skill, or lack thereof, as a writer. But overall, I admire a lot of Lovecraft's style. I like that he did the way he wanted to do. He didn't care what popular fiction looked like or what pulp fiction typically looked like. He did what Lovecraft wanted to do. And if more YouTubers were like that, if more movie reviewers were out there like that on YouTube, if more book reviewers or anything like that were more like that, we would all have a happier world the way YouTube used to be like a good 10 years ago, when we all had a great time. But for now, The Alchemist. I don't really have much more to say about it. It's fine. It's above average. As I said, it's a decent story. I like the concept, as I said. Execution's a little wonky, as I've said like 3 times. But overall, I like it. Does that make sense? It's like, I like it? You have to have a little question mark on the end of the sentence. I like it? Yeah, it's alright. Anyway, The Alchemist. If I had to rate this story and this collection on a 5-star basis, I'd probably give it about a 3 out of 5 stars, even though I think it's above average, and 3 for me is right at average, you know? I think that's a fine, almost 4, but really just a 3 for me personally in my taste. But it's good. You know, I recommend it if you're a Lovecraft fan, if you haven't read this one before. It's one of the earlier ones. A lot of people read this when they read the collections of H.P. Lovecraft stuff. There's so many versions of that anyway. Anyway, what are your thoughts on The Alchemist? Do you love it? Do you hate it? Put all your thoughts and comments down below, folks. I would love to hear what you have to say. Thank you for watching all, and God bless you, and goodbye.